My name is Julia Geiger. I serve on the student team here at Bridgepoint as well as in the nursery in the back. And I've been at Bridgepoint for about 6 years now. I started here at 2019. And I was raised in Colorado, and after I moved to Georgia from Colorado, I actually was at a different church in downtown Atlanta for about 4 years. And pretty soon after I had moved to Georgia, I felt like God was stirring something new in me. I felt like he was calling me and putting this dream in me to teach and to study the Word and to teach others how to study the Word and how to find God in his Word and things surrounded around public speaking. And I started getting really excited about this, but I didn't know how it was going to come about. I was a part of this church. It was a big church, and I was serving in the student ministry, and I just kind of didn't know what was next, but I knew that God was stirring this thing in me. And soon after this, I was serving in student ministry, and we had basically a separate service for the middle schoolers that we did for, the adults and everyone else. And so someone would teach just middle school. And my youth leader at the time came to us one time at a leader meeting, and he said, hey, if any of y'all want to teach on a Sunday in middle school, we would love to develop that in you. We have this system and this process, this kind of discipleship path for you to go along and then eventually get to the point where you're teaching on a Sunday for middle school. And I was like, perfect. God, this is exactly what you're doing. Like, I see you. All right, this is what you've called me to. This is great. So I go to my leader and I'm like, hey, that's me. Hi, when can I start? I'm really excited about this. I'm really passionate about this. I want to be put on this path of discipleship in teaching and public speaking. And his answer was basically like, yeah, that'd be great. We'll talk about that later. Awesome. So I was like, okay, all right. So I continue serving, and it was about a year long of me kind of every couple months being like, hey, I'm still interested in that. Like, is that still a thing? Are we still doing that? And sometimes I would send him an email, and usually that email would get ignored. And then sometimes I would talk to him in person, and he would just kind of be like, yeah, we'll talk about that. Sure. And it was a little bit feeling like I got blown off. And so eventually I start honestly having this conversation where I'm frustrated, and I'm talking to my co-leader. And I'm like, what? What am I missing? Come on. Like, he offered, right? Like, he said if we were interested to talk to him. And I'm watching people who have been a part of, they've been a leader at students for 4 months. And now all of a sudden they're up there and they're teaching on, middle school on a Sunday. What am I doing wrong? And my co-leader goes, Julia, come on. What do they all have in common? They're men. I was like, no, you're wrong. Like, no, there's no way. And we had a few female speakers, but they were always people who did public speaking for a living. And so I was like, no, there's no way. Like, they're not. That's crazy. So I'm very conflict avoidant. It's something that I am working on, trying to get better at over the years. But at the time, I was so nervous. I was like, I know I got to talk to him. And it took me a few months. And finally, I was like, okay, I'm going to text him. And I'm going to be like, hey, here's the conversation I had. This is crazy, right? Like, I just want to hear, from you, like, what's going on? Why can't I kind of get my foot in the door? And I sent him this text. And basically, his answer back was, no, it's not that we don't believe in having women speakers. But this path that we have, this discipleship path, it's very intentional, and it's a very intimate kind of relationship. And because we don't have a woman on our team that has these skills, we don't have anyone that could take you through that path. And it would be inappropriate for one of the men on our team to take you through that path. So it's like, boom, door closed. And I'm kind of sitting here thinking like, okay, God, like what? You told me to do this. You started stirring this in me. I thought I heard from you. Did I not? Did you just put me through this to set me up to fail? I don't understand. What am I doing wrong? And I think there's this really common temptation in the Christian walk that if God gives us a dream or if he calls us to something, that the path is just going to be laid out at our feet, and it's going to be a straight shot, and it's going to make sense every step of the way, and it's going to be easy, and there's nothing going to be getting in our way. But when we read scripture, that is not the case. It is again and again that God calls someone, and it is years later before the promise that he spoke to them is fulfilled. He told Abraham he was going to have a kid, and it was 25 years before he actually had a kid. Imagine going through that waiting period where you're like, God, hello? Are you still here? What's happening? And I think we can either look at the obstacles or the delays, the waiting season in our path, and we can see them as blocks on our path toward the will of God, or can we see them as an important process of the path toward what God has laid out for us? So we see it again and again in the scriptures that God will give someone a promise, he'll give someone a call, and it'll be years before he fulfills that call. And one of those people was a man named Joseph. And you might be familiar with Joseph. You probably, learned about him in Sunday school, or his story is found at the end of Genesis, and it's a really beautiful story about God's faithfulness in the waiting and using, honestly, some really awful circumstances and God bringing his glory through all of it. So I want to talk through that story today to give you a little bit of background. God basically decided he's going to call a nation. He's going to set a family and says, through you there will be a nation, and they're going to be my light to the world. They're going to show the world what it looks like to bring my kingdom to earth. And you're going to show the world what it looks like to bring my love, to bring my light to the people around you, and all the other nations will know that you have been set as a nation chosen by God. And through this nation came a man named Jacob. And Jacob had 12 sons. Talk about a lot of mouths to feed. Like, we thought Amanda had a lot of kids. No, she's got nothing on Jacob, right? So this man named Jacob has 12 sons, and one of them is his favorite kid. And I don't know if you've ever been in school where there's this one kid who's the teacher's pet, right? They get the best grades. They get all the answers right. The teacher's always calling on them to do the fun things, the demonstrations. Maybe they're tattling on other kids. Okay, I don't know about you, but in my school, this person was not the popular kid. The teacher liked them, but no one else liked them. And this is how it was with Joseph. His father had favoritism on him, and his brothers hated him for it. So we are in this story. This is where we're picking up, and Joseph has a dream. If you have your Bibles, please open them up to Genesis 37, verse 6. He, talking about Joseph, said to them, his brothers, "Listen to this dream I had. There we were, binding sheaves of grain in the field. Suddenly, my sheaf stood up, and your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. Are you really going to reign over us?" His brothers asked him. "Are you going to rule us?" So they hated him even more because of his dream and what he had said. And afterwards it talks about that Joseph had a second dream where his brothers were stars and his parents were the sun and the moon, and they were all bowing down to him. So you've got Joseph, and he's the favorite of his father, but all his brothers hate him. And he's just finished the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and he takes a page out of that and says, oh, here's what I'm going to do. My brothers hate me, so how I'm going to get them to like me is I'm going to go up to them and say, hey, by the way, God said I'm better than you. How fun is that? I do not know what was going through his brain. He was either arrogant or naive. Either way, he tells his brothers, and they hate him for it. And it says that they conspire to get together and to kill him. So they take him and they throw him in this empty well. And then they see traders going along and they go, okay, no, never mind. We're not going to kill him. We're not going to get his blood on our hands. We're just going to sell him into slavery. And so they sell him into slavery, and he ends up going to Egypt. And they take his coat that his father had given him, this symbol of his father's favoritism on him, and they dip it in blood and they say, Dad, look, your favorite son is dead. And he is in slavery in Egypt. He gets bought by a man named Potiphar, and he's in his house. God gave him a dream. And in this dream, he is going to rule over his family. But here he is, abandoned and betrayed by those closest to him and enslaved in a nation hundreds of miles from home. And we're left thinking, what went wrong? The promise often doesn't match the path. We have expectations of, okay, God gave me this dream. God gave me this burning in my heart. I felt like God told me that there was this thing that was going to happen. But where I'm at, there's no way that where I'm at could lead to that thing that I felt like he told me. And we have expectations of how our path is going to line up to the promise that God spoke to us. And I really doubt that Joseph saw this coming. Out of everything, he has this dream and he goes, great, God has this awesome call and this awesome plan for my life. But now here I am, I'm in slavery and I'm away from my father, away from my home. And I didn't see this coming. But instead of getting angry and getting bitter, Joseph starts by being faithful where he is. Genesis 39, 2-4 says this: "The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, serving in the household of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord made everything he did successful, Joseph found favor with his master and became his personal attendant. Potiphar also put him in charge of his household and placed all that he owned under his authority." I think it's amazing that there's two things going on here. One, that the Lord was with Joseph, and he had put favor on his life. But if Joseph had decided to get angry and bitter and basically say, like, okay, well, I guess God's just abandoned me, and this is not the way I saw this road going, he would not have gotten favor. Like, nobody wants a slave or someone running everything in front of in their house if they just have a terrible attitude, right? But we know that he worked faithfully, that he worked hard, that he was smart, and that everything that he did kind of goes against what we would expect his reaction to be. We can either when suffering and hardship comes our way, we can either get bitter or we can trust in what God has spoken to us. We can trust in his plan for our life, because bitterness keeps you stuck, but trust moves you forward. We can either get bogged down from the expectation of what we think should have happened, or we can keep taking steps saying, okay, God, this isn't where I thought I would end up being. I thought the path was going there, and this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me right now, but I'm going to trust that you're still in control, that you still have me, that you're still with me, and I'm going to be faithful where I'm at right now. After my youth pastor had shut the door, I was left just feeling like, what am I supposed to do now? Because, God, I thought you told me to pursue this, and now I don't know where I'm supposed to turn. It kind of seems like that door is closed. And I remember I wanted to get bitter. I wanted to get angry, and I wanted to quit. I wanted to just be like, I'm done with serving in student ministry. I want to leave that church. I want to, do all of that, and I just want to turn away. But the Lord urged me to dig into the scripture, and he told me, I want you to look at every instance where Jesus interacts with a woman in the gospel. And what do you see? What are the patterns of what you see? And it was so beautiful, because again and again, Jesus speaks to women of their value, and he empowers their story and their testimony and encourages them to share it to others. So I said, okay, I'm starting to feel a little more confident that maybe I didn't mishear you, that what you spoke to me is real, that I have been called to do this. And maybe I can't do it the way that I want to right now, but how can I be faithful where I'm at? So I'm doing this study in the Word, and I'm going through the Word of how Jesus interacts with women. At the same time, I'm still serving in students. And I ended up meeting this girl that she and I had a 10-year mentoring relationship that we continue to this day. And that relationship has been such a blessing on my life, and I've learned so much from her. And I've been so blessed by her that if I had quit and gotten angry and bitter, I would not have been able to experience that relationship, and I would not have grown in the way that I did because of it. What felt to me like a dead end ended up becoming my training ground, because in the waiting, God is training. We think that these in-between moments, maybe it's defined by hardship, maybe it's defined by we're just feeling stuck, nothing's moving forward, but they are not wasted. God is doing something in them. He is producing something in us that could not otherwise be produced if everything was just smooth sailing the entire time. Unfortunately for Joseph, his trials didn't stop there. So he is second in command in Potiphar's house. He's doing everything right. He is amazing. He is on it. He is the guy. And then Potiphar's wife accuses him of trying to rape her, and he's falsely accused, and he is thrown in prison. And again, we're left wondering, what the heck happened? Another delay, another wrong turn. And again, Joseph has a choice. He can either get bitter, and he can either give up and say, okay, God, clearly you're not actually with me. Clearly you don't actually have anything good for me, because I took a terrible situation, slavery, and I worked really, really hard in that. And I worked my way up, and now, boom, here I am, falsely imprisoned for a crime I did not commit. I was trying to be integritous by not sleeping with my boss's wife, and she couldn't handle the rejection and told everyone that I tried to take advantage of her. And now I'm in prison. It would have been so easy for him to get angry and to give up, but instead, let's look what he does. Genesis 39:21-23 says, "But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him. He granted him favor with the prison warden. The warden put all the prisoners who were in the prison under Joseph's authority, and he was responsible for everything that was done there. The warden did not bother with anything under Joseph's authority because the Lord was with him, and the Lord made everything that he did successful." Joseph chose trust and faithfulness, and again, the Lord was with him. And I love that it says that he extended kindness to Joseph. And you're looking at that and you're like, that does not make sense to me. He's in prison for something he didn't do. Like, how is that kindness, God? But we can look at the situations in which we find ourselves and say, maybe I would never choose this for myself. And maybe an injustice has been done to me, or maybe things just aren't working out the way that I want them to. And can I say, like, okay, I'm just going to bristle against that and fight against that and say, okay, God, clearly you've abandoned me. Clearly you don't actually have anything for me. At best, I misheard you. At worst, you were lying to me. And that's how we can react. Or we can say, God, I choose to believe that even this, even at the bottom of a prison, you can turn something around, and you can use me if I continue to trust you and if I continue to be faithful where I'm at. After that door was closed, and I ended up serving for another year after that, and at that point, my husband ended up making a career change because he actually worked for that church at the time. And so we kind of started looking at, maybe we'll find a new church that's a little bit closer to us, that's not all the way in downtown Atlanta. And I have a few friends that come to this church that we've known for decades. The Campbells are some of them, the Wilsons, that used to be the worship leader here, and the Griggses. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to this church because I have friends there, and that's a little, less scary, and I'll just give it a try. And I walked into Bridgepoint wounded and scared of getting hurt again. And I honestly walked in with an attitude of, I don't know if I can trust the church. I don't know if I can trust church leadership. I don't know if I can trust men in church leadership. And my heart was very scared of being hurt again. And this amazing thing happened where I was coming in and I was like, okay, I'm scared of getting hurt, but I want to get involved. So I'm just going to get involved wherever I can. And I served with kids for a while under Amanda, and she did an amazing job at making me feel like I had a place here and like I had things that I could offer here. And that started to heal me a little bit and started to make me feel like maybe I can trust this situation. And then one Sunday, about a month or two after I joined Bridgepoint, Keith Cezak, he was our old youth pastor, he came up to me and he said, hey, I want to tell you, I see in you that I think you could be really good at teaching and public speaking. And so we have this team, we called it the host team, and we kind of do it a little bit differently than we used to, where we used to have somebody after the first 2 songs come in, and it was somebody who wasn't the main speaker, and they would just give like a little Devo moment of like, oh, here's something the Lord is teaching me, or here's something I read, or here's something the song makes me think of, here's a way that you can, kind of see the Lord. And it's like this little blurb, this 3-minute thing, where Keith said, okay, like I want you to start doing that. And it was like this little thing of like, hey, we're going to put you on stage. And no, you don't get to just like immediately go up and talk in front of everyone, for 40 minutes or whatever. But we're going to start developing you. And I could have chosen in that moment of like, no, you've got an agenda somewhere. I don't trust you. I don't think that you're actually going to do this. And I could have chosen bitterness, and I could have chosen anger and hurt, but instead I said, okay, let's step forward and let's do this. And I'll be honest, I was not very good when I first started. I tended to ramble a little bit, and I tripped over my words, and sometimes I kind of lost the plot of what I was saying along the way. But Keith, he would sit in this front row, and he would take a video of me as I was doing my host moment, and then he would show it to me afterward, and he'd be like, okay, I want you to watch this, and I want you to see how can you improve? How can you get better? And then I ended up joining a life group that Matt was leading on public speaking, and he was intentional with me of helping me get better, of like, okay, here's what you're good at, so like lean into that, and here's the ways that you can improve. And these amazing men who were committed to God and committed to finding people in their church, whatever it looked like, into bringing their gifts and to developing them. And I'm up here on stage today because someone looked at me, and instead of seeing limitations, they saw potential. And they were willing to work with me, and they were willing to help me get better. Because honestly, even after those first couple Sundays where I hosted, they could have been like, you're not very good at this. Let's try to find something else for you. But instead they said, no, I still think you could be good at this. Let's just work, let's tweak, let's find these little ways that you can get better. And it's such a blessing to me. I take it so, it's an honor, honestly, to me, that I get to be up here, that Matt trusts me that much to speak to y'all, that y'all trust me this much. They don't just, turn around and walk out the second that I walk up here. And I was scared when I first started, but if I had not continued to be faithful, then I wouldn't have been ready when the moment of opportunity came. I could have come to Bridgepoint bitter and apathetic, and honestly, those doors would not have opened for me, nor should they have. After years in prison, Joseph decides, he's in it, he's working, he's faithful, and he probably in his mind, he doesn't know if he'll ever get out. He might be in prison for the rest of his life, for all he knows. And after he's been in prison for about 13 years, Pharaoh starts having these dreams. And these dreams are haunting him, and no one can interpret them. And Joseph ends up getting called forward because he had interpreted some dreams of some prisoners during his time in prison and had been able to accurately interpret these dreams. And they say, okay, you here, like you were in prison, can you interpret Pharaoh's dreams? And not only does he interpret Pharaoh's dreams, which ended up meaning that Egypt was going to have 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. But on top of that, he comes up with a plan of how to help save Egypt. And he says, okay, we're going to take a little bit every year of this plenty, and we're going to save it, and then that's going to carry us through these 7 years of famine. And it's amazing that he went above and beyond what was asked of him because of the training that he had received in prison and in his time in Potiphar's household, that he had known how to be second in command. He had known, he was smart, he had known how to have the plans, how to work hard, how to find the right solution. And he was ready for the moment when the promise that he was given all those years ago to be fulfilled because of the training that was done in him in the waiting period. And God does end up fulfilling that promise, is that he ends up being placed second in command. Genesis 41, 37 through 40 says this: the proposal pleased Pharaoh and all of his servants. And he said to them, can we find anyone like this? a man who has God's Spirit in him. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one as discerning and wise as you are. You will be over my house, and all my people will obey your commands. Only I, as king, will be greater than you. So the dream that God gave to Joseph as a teenager, as a little snotty teenager who's trying to kind of one-up his brothers, that maybe he wasn't ready for it in the moment, it finally came to pass. Because after those 7 years of plenty, and they're in famine, and not only is Egypt having a famine, but Canaan, where his family is from, is also having a famine. And his brothers end up coming from Canaan to Egypt, and they all bow down before him because he was second in command in all of Egypt. And instead of bitterness, he chose forgiveness, and he chose to restore relationship with his brothers. Sometimes the things that are in our way are an injustice. What was done to Joseph was an injustice. His brothers should not have sold him into slavery. Potiphar's wife should not have accused him of something he didn't do. He should not have been thrown in prison. Sometimes someone hurts us in a way that is unjust. Sometimes the obstacles are just obstacles. Sometimes it's like we feel like we've done something that has derailed us from the plan that God has for our life. And what had happened to me, it might surprise you to hear, I don't think it was an injustice. I don't think that the person who said, no, we're going to close this door for you, was necessarily wrong, because he was a leader and it was absolutely within his rights to decide how he was going to lead his team. And I have so much respect for that man and that team still to this day, because I believe that they are following the Lord's plan, and I believe they're looking to glorify God in everything that they do. And I could sit here and I could be like, well, they were wrong because they didn't roll out the red carpet for me to do what God said he was going to do in my life. Actually, what was happening in the obstacles is that God was preparing me in his own way. And maybe I don't agree with everything that they did, but I can respect it and I can love them. And I can still hope good things for them. Because what God did to me in the obstacles, in the roadblocks, grew me in a way that I needed to be grown in order to be where I am today, in order to be who I am today. And sometimes with our own path, maybe it's injustice. Maybe the obstacles are just obstacles. Maybe it's just waiting, where you're like, I feel like I'm supposed to be doing this thing, and it just feels like nothing is moving forward, like I'm stuck and I'm pushing. But regardless of what it is, can we trust that God is using it? Because the waiting is never wasted with him. It's preparation. I love, one of my favorite verses is Philippians 1:6, because it talks about, I know that he who began a good work in you will see it to completion on the day of Jesus Christ. That's one of my favorite verses because it gives me so much grace that he's never done working. That even when I stumble, even when things don't look how I think they're supposed to look, it says he's going to finish his work. And that is true of every single one of us, that wherever you are today, you think, this isn't where I thought I would be. This isn't how I thought this would look right now. But I can promise that God is not done working. And it's such an honor to me to be able to stand here today. I do see this as a fulfillment of the promise that God gave me, but it's also cool because I have hope that he's not done yet. That whatever things look like in the future for me, wherever this gift that I feel like he has given me takes me, that he's going to do awesome things with it. And there will be ups and there will be downs, but at the end of the day, that it'll all be for his glory. And that is my hope first and foremost, not for my own pride or my own, like, how cool is it that God, put me in this place? And it is cool. But first and foremost, that God says that I get to be part of his mission. Because Joseph being second in command, the point of that was not, oh, look at how famous, look at how much power he got. Isn't that cool? But rather that God used Joseph to save many lives and to bring the Israelite nation to Egypt, which was ultimately part of his plan to bring amazing things and to spread his message across the world. And that's our hope, is that God would use us, whatever it looks like, whether it's exactly where we feel like we're supposed to be or whether it's the waiting in between, that God is using us. He allows us to be part of his mission. In the same way, the gospel reminds us that Jesus himself was faithful in the waiting. He endured hardship and torture and rejection and even death. But all of that brought about the redemptive story that each one of us is different today because of the work that Jesus did on the cross. When we remain faithful in the waiting, we participate in that same story. The story of God bringing life, hope, and salvation to the world. Faithfulness in the waiting matters because it's shaping you into something. God is doing something in you when we wait. Joseph didn't get the throne at 17. He probably shouldn't have, as we see by his interaction with his brothers. But God was shaping him through rejection, through slavery, through imprisonment. All of that was being shaped so that God's mission could be accomplished through someone. And that story is available for every single one of us. When we remain faithful in the waiting, we can join God's story. So what about us? Maybe you have a sense of a calling. Maybe you feel like God has given you a picture or something that you feel like you're supposed to lead into, to pursue. And it doesn't have to be one thing. I think that's a very modern Western kind of ideology of like, oh, we have a career and that one thing is what we're meant to do for the rest of our lives. It's like God works in everything. And it could look one way in one season, and then you could shift and pivot and it could work another way in another season, because the point is not what is happening, but it's what's being done through you. Sorry. Maybe you're tempted to think that you misheard God, but when we're faithful and when we trust in what he's done in us, we're reminded that he's not wasting what he's done for us, that he's preparing us. And we can be faithful at the bottom of an empty well, and we can be faithful as a slave in Potiphar's house, and we can be faithful when we're in prison, and we can be faithful in the palace. And every single one of those steps is preparing us so that when God says now, we're ready for it. What does this mean for us? Are we going to let bitterness keep us stuck, or are we going to move forward in trust? How do we move forward in trust? Number one is to work the assignment, not just the dream. So you can say, I have this dream, and this is what I want to do, so I'm only going to do things that look like that dream. But we have to trust that where God has placed us right now is doing things in us, that he's building character, or he's building situations that will end up helping and equipping us later. And are we willing to be faithful in the small things so that we can be faithful in the big things? Number two is to trade bitterness for trust. We need to be honest with God about our disappointments. We can tell him. I remember there was one moment where I was on a plane to Colorado and I was crying and I was mad at God. And I was saying, what have you done? Like, you told me to do this, and this feels like such a disappointment. And what's interesting is that what I felt God's reaction was not, how dare you not trust me? But that he was happy that I was being honest with him, because honesty is such an awesome, raw place for us to start in our relationship with God. We can't just pretend that we're not disappointed. But in sharing our disappointments with God, we have to be willing to say, am I going to cap all of this with trust? And say, whatever this looks like, God, I trust that you are still in it with me. I trust that you're still leading me. Are we going to be willing to be faithful and to bow to his sovereignty regardless of how it turns out in our own lives? Number three is to train while you wait. So what is the dream? What is that thing that keeps you up at night? What is that thing that's burning in you that you're like, I feel like the Lord has been speaking this to me and I want to go after it, but maybe you're scared, or maybe you don't see a path to go after it. You say, what is the Lord calling me to? Who are the people around me that he's calling me to love? How can you train and equip yourself in that season? How can the season that you're in right now help you for where you want to go? So right now, this summer, I started something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I started some seminary classes, and I've been really excited about it because for a long time, I was like, I want to do this, but I don't see how that could ever happen. Like, I've got 2 little kids. It's expensive. I just don't see how it could happen. And I ended up kind of through a random situation finding this online self-paced seminary classes. And I'm going through it. And it's so cool because it's slow and it's just a little bit right now, but it's a way that I'm training and equipping myself to hopefully be able to do more of this in the future and to hopefully get better and better at it. So what is that thing that you can do? What is the step forward that you can take right now to get better so that the waiting period isn't a waste, but it ends up being your training ground for what God has for you later? Number 4 is to keep perspective. We have to remember that the point of God's calling on our life is to invite us into the story of the gospel. It's to invite us into the mission to bring heaven to earth. And we have to be able to keep that perspective, whether we're at the lowest of lows and saying, okay, God, like I'm right here and it seems like I'm farther than ever from getting away from your promise that you made to me. Or whether we're on the highest of highs and feeling like, God, I'm living it, I'm in it, and maybe that's when pride comes in and starts to say, look at all this that you did all by yourself. Isn't that cool? But we have to keep the perspective where it was said of Joseph, the Lord was with him. The Lord granted him favor in Potiphar's house and in the prison. And the same is true of our lives. We don't do any of this by ourselves. That we can be faithful and we can have character, integrity wherever we're in, but we have to continually, again and again, point the glory back to God because he is the one that makes anything good happen in our lives. He is the source of any kind of life or fruition in our lives. And when we are aligned, when we see the gospel as our North Star by which we are charting our course, and saying, no matter where I find myself, if I'm in rough seas and it's like the worst storm I've ever seen in my life, but I still see that star that is the gospel that I am working to bring to the earth, that I'm working to glorify the Lord, that I'm working to love people the way that he loves people, then whatever you're in, it's never wasted, and he sees it as beautiful, and he sees it as just as much an important part of his mission to bring heaven to earth as when we're on the calmest of seas or doing exactly what we want to be doing in life. We have to keep the perspective of Jesus being our goal of everything we are working towards. We're going to have a moment of communion like we do every week. And I want to remind you, it's just like Matt says, this is the most important thing that you can do today, is to spend time with Jesus, our Savior. Is to have a moment with him where we remember what he's done for us. It's not to hear our band speak, even though they're awesome. It's not to hear me speak. It's not even to serve or to the most important thing that we can do. While all those other things are good, they come second to our relationship with God that everything else flows out of. So as you take the elements, I have a couple of questions for you to think about. Number 1, is there a delayed promise or disappointment that has kept me from moving forward? Is there maybe some anger or bitterness towards people, towards the situation, towards God, that you just need to be honest with him about? Say, what is this thing that I feel like is in my path and I need to come to terms with it? And how could I shift my perspective as not seeing it as an obstacle to hurt me, but as an opportunity to grow me? Number 2, how can I be faithful where I currently am? Whether you're feel like you're doing exactly what you want to do, or maybe you're just in this like meh, kind of what feels ordinary sort of season. You're like, I don't really see how this isn't really lighting me up. This isn't really doing anything for me. But can we believe that God is still using that? And how can you be faithful and be excellent in the things that you're doing Number 3, how can I shift my perspective to see the gospel as my ultimate calling? How can I maybe trade my bitterness for trust? And say, okay, I'm not going to choose to see this as the world would see it, as an obstacle or as hurt or something that's getting in my way, but how can I see all of this as ultimately pointing toward the gospel, towards Jesus' mission to bring heaven to earth? Let's pray. God, thank you so much that you are good. That no matter where we are, whether we're in the lowest pit or whether we're in second in command in the palace, that you're with us. And that's important, much more important than where we are. God, I ask that you help us to fix our eyes on you and on what you're doing in our life. God, I ask that you inspire us and stoke the flame of whatever dreams that have been put in people's hearts, and remind every single one of us that you're never done working, that you have good things for us that will ultimately be for our benefit and for your glory. We love you and we praise you. Amen. Go ahead and take the elements around the room as you feel led.